everybody. Welcome back to POW Science. My name is Mr. Miles. I'll be your POW Science scientist today, and we are in my car today, and that's because today we're going to go on a little road trip. We haven't done anything botanical in a little while, and I thought it might be fun to take you down to the Great Swamp Management Area and show you some really cool, interesting plants. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to find, but the really cool thing about Great Swamp is that because it's so well protected, there are all sorts of different species there. And a lot of the species you can find other places, but you won't necessarily find everything so conveniently on one nice, neat little path. So we're going to see what I find. I have my bright yellow shirt on because it is hunting season and I have to be safe. And I've got my mask in case I see any crowds of people. And most importantly, I've got my phone to take some cool videos of some plants. So keep on watching for the first plant. So this is haircap moss, or Polytrichum commune. And this is a really easy plant to find. It grows all over the place. It's in the woods outside your house. It's on the bike path. It is pretty much everywhere. And it is here at Great Swamp. It's really easy to identify because from above, the little bits of moss are star-shaped. And also, we are at the time of year when it is producing these reproductive structures called sporophytes, which are kind of these long, skinny, hair-looking things. With those little bells on them. So they're kind of like flowers, but they're not technically flowers. They're called sporophytes instead. All right, so here we have Osmundastrum cinnamomea, or the cinnamon fern. So cinnamon fern is really, really easy to find. It's really, really easy to identify. It grows all over the place. And it's really the only kind of big fern that we have here in Rhode Island, at least that I know of. So we have a lot of little ferns, a lot of like kind of medium-sized ferns, but if you've got a fern that's up to your belly or up to your chest, 100% a cinnamon fern. Another way that you can identify them that we can't really use anymore because it's a bit too late in the season is they also grow these big brown fertile fronds in the middle. Those are not a different plant. They are just the spore-producing structures of the fern, and so that's how they reproduce and make more spores. But the ferns have already dropped their spores this year, I believe, so I don't see any more of the stalks. So it's a little bit too late to use that this year, but for next year. So I'm not 100% certain on the identity of our plant here that we have. So this is what I believe is Erigeron annuus, or the Eastern Daisy fleabane. But I wanted to point it out anyway because even if I'm not completely sure about it, it's a really good example of one of the biggest groups of flowers on the whole planet. So this is an aster, and you can recognize asters because they're kind of like the typical flowers that you draw pictures of. They've got a circular middle, and then they've got lots and lots of petals that go straight out from the outside. So things like daisies are asters. Things like these little asters right here are asters. So any type of flower that has that sort of shape. And honestly, asters can be kind of hard to identify, so a lot of times even botanists actually struggle to identify asters in the field, and they have to go back and bring them under their microscopes and look at tiny little details. So I think this is Erigeron annuus, but honestly, could be wrong, but I know that it is an aster. So this plant is Drosera intermedia, which is the spoon-leaved sundew. So this is probably the hardest plant of the plant that I'm going to show you here today to find. It tends to live close to water, and it likes really marshy areas. So you're not going to really just find this kind of growing in your backyard. So it is an interesting plant because it is actually carnivorous. Those little red hairs all over them, it uses those to attract and then trap small insects like flies, and then it digests the juices inside their bodies. So, very, very gross, but also very, very cool. So this plant here has a special place in my heart because it is actually one of the very first plants that I ever identified back when I took plant taxonomy in college, which is when I learned all these plant names to begin with. So this is Trifolium tens. So this is also called the red clover. And like other clovers, it's got 3 leaves on each, or 3 leaflets, I should say, on each little leaf. It also has these really big, pretty red, purpley kind of flowers. And this is the type of plant that if you didn't mow your lawn, you would have this plant growing in your lawn. Like, it grows incessantly, like, all over the place. So usually I'm not a big fan of, like, ripping plants out of the ground if I'm not planning on, like, keeping them or growing them. But this time wasn't a big deal because if you take a look around me, all kinds of it. So yeah, this is a really common plant, but it's one that I love, so I had to point it out. All right, so this tree here is Elaeagnus umbellatum, or the autumn olive tree. So a few ways to spot this. Number one, it's got this really interesting dotted sort of texture to the leaves. You can feel it with your fingers. And if you flip it over, it's kind of chrome looking underneath. And last but not least, at this time of year, it's going to have those little brown things coming out of them. So those used to be flowers, then they got pollinated, and now they are developing berries. So by the time that fall hits, they're going to be big and juicy and red and are going to feed lots and lots of little forest critters.